Good afternoon, Year 5. Welcome to this week's Humanities lessons, the last one of this term. So let's get going. So make sure you have in front of you your writing book and your pen. Today is Monday, the 13th of July 2020, and your learning intention is to describe the landforms and industry of the Great Plains region. So a landform is a natural feature of the Earth's surface, and industry is a sector that produces goods or related services within an economy. So by the end of this lesson, you will be able to describe the industries and landforms of the Great Plains region. So off we go, carrying on from our journey. So we are exploring the Great Plains from the Midwest, and if we travel to the west of the region known as the Great Plains, this is located near the center of the United States. It includes the states of Oklahoma, Kansas, Nebraska, South Dakota, and North Dakota. A plain is a flat area without hills or mountains. So if you fly over it, you will be amazed at just how flat most of the region is. There are not as many big cities there as there are in the East or the Midwest. Instead, this land is covered with many farms and ranches. Over the eastern part of the Great Plains, there are huge fields of wheat. So much wheat is grown in this area that it is called America's breadbasket. Wheat is used to make the food called bread. Obviously, we know that. In the western part of the region, there are cattle ranches where much of the country's beef is raised. Another important product of the region is oil. Oil is turned into gasoline or petrol as we know it, that helps run the millions of cars that Americans drive today. When we read about the history of the Great Plains, we learn how much the region has changed in the last 200 years. We learn that if we had flown over the plains in the early 1800s, we would have seen thousands of animals called bison, and you can see a picture of a bison there. They're rather big, aren't they? The Native Americans who lived in the region hunted the bison for food. They also made use of the many parts of the bison, especially the hide. So if you look underneath, we've got some vocab, and the hide is the animal's skin. In the 1800s, European settlers began moving into the Great Plains, taking over land that had belonged to the Native Americans. The settlers also hunted the bison, and later, in an attempt to defeat Native American resistance to increased European settlement, they killed so many bison that the great herds almost vanished. The destruction of the herds seriously harmed the Native American way of life on the Great Plains. The Native Americans were unable to stop the advance on their lands. When the US Army came west to support the settlers, the Native Americans were eventually forced to move to special areas called reservations. At one time, the present-day state of Oklahoma was called Indian Territory, and many Native Americans from various parts of the United States were forced to move there. Although they lost large areas of land across the United States, the Native American culture survived. Today, Native Americans live throughout the United States. So we have a little bit more vocab for you here. So reservation is an area of land set aside by the federal government for Native Americans. It means it's especially for them. People have always had to be tough to survive on the Great Plains. The region has little water and a harsh climate with hot summers and freezing winters. Spring is tornado season in the Great Plains. A tornado is a great type of storm that occurs when a swirling cloud shaped like a funnel passes over the land. Tornadoes bring destructive winds of more than 100 miles per hour. Many of the tornadoes on Earth happen in a part of the Great Plains called Tornado Alley, and you can see marked out on the maps there whereabouts that is. In the northern part of the region, the winter weather is especially harsh. This might be one reason why the states of North and South Dakota have so few people. North Dakota is bigger than the state of New York, but New York has more than 20 times as many people. In South Dakota, there is an area called Badlands. The colored hills of rock are carved into different shapes by erosion. People called this land bad because it was dry and barren. So we have some more vocab for you. So erosion, the carrying away of soil and rock by water, ice or wind. And barren is having little or no vegetation. So that means plants. In a national park near the Badlands, four gigantic faces stare down from the side of a hill. The massive sculpture, called Mount Rushmore, features the faces of four American presidents: George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Theodore Roosevelt, and Abraham Lincoln. Each face is almost 60 feet tall. So there we go. We have finished our journey around the Great Plains. So your task today is just answer these few questions. Which states make up the Great Plains region? Can you name the industries in the Great Plains region? Describe the landform over the Great Plains. What happens in the spring on the Great Plains? Why is the eastern area of the Great Plains called America's breadbasket? What other products come from the western area of the Great Plains? So by answering those questions, you will be describing the industry and the landforms of the Great Plains. And if you're up for a challenge, answer this question. Why are the Great Plains less populated than the other regions of the United States? And if you've managed all of that, send your completed work to Year 5 at grange.harrow.school.uk. Make sure you put for Mrs. Hubbard. And Year 5, I'd really like to say thank you very much for your participation in these lessons this term. I hope you've enjoyed it as much as I have, and I look forward to seeing you in Year 6. Oh, I forgot. Watch out for Year 5 celebration videos with all the fantastic work that you've been doing.